The title of my talk is Ecological Wisdom for Chaotic, Challenging Times. And the first thing that we learn when we think of ecology as our primary science, the primary interdisciplinary science of, to use religious language, God's nature. It's the science of Gaia in right relationship to Gaia. It's the science of right relationship to primary reality. In other words, all those aspects of reality that are required for us to even exist. Air, water, soil, forests, life, carbon dioxide at a CO2 level that allows for our kind of life. These things are primary reality. And ecological wisdom, the heart of ecological wisdom is humility and the recognition that there are limits. I call them grace limits. There is a limit to what we can take from primary reality and what we can exude in terms of our waste before the biosystems start breaking down. In the world of ecology, it's called carrying capacity. There's a carrying capacity to every bioregion, every island, every continent, and the planet as a whole. In other words, there's only so many resources that we can take and waste that we can exude before the health of the biosystems start to degrade. We know of 24 previous civilizations that became complex and their own greatness became their own undoing. And then there's a dark age. And then another civilization rises, it becomes great, and its own greatness becomes its own undoing. Pride, hubris, is the main thing that causes the fall of civilizations. So, on this topic of ecological wisdom for chaotic, challenging times, I have good news and I have bad news. Now, I'm going to ask you whether you want the good news or the bad news first. So, everybody who would like the good news first, raise your hand. Okay, everybody who would like the bad news first, raise your hand. Okay, you got it. The bad news is that we can't save industrial civilization. The bad news is that we are in a contraction phase. It's called Catabolic Collapse. It's the way all civilizations fall. How civilizations fall on the downside is a process of what happens is they overextend what they can afford to maintain and they start eating themselves. And then there's temporary recoveries. And then it gets back, and in temporary recoveries. We talk about the Roman Empire falling. The Roman Empire wasn't a cliff. It was like rolling down a mountain. It was a stair step that took 325 years. And there were partial recoveries. That's the way civilizations fall. So the bad news is we are easily 35 to 40 years into the catabolic collapse phase of industrial civilization. There is no saving industrial civilization. The rapacious way that we are being with the natural world, where we measure progress by how fast we can take nature and turn it into pollution, benefiting the few at the expense of the many, and forcing billions of us. This is our economic system. Our economic system measures progress by how fast it can take the biosphere, turn it into pollution, rewards the few at the expense of the many, and forces billions of us to betray the future just by pursuing the good life. Now, whether you call that unsustainable, insane, or demonic really doesn't matter. It doesn't have a future. So that's the bad news. All the peace and justice work that we do, all the good work that we do as Unitarian Universalists and liberal people, moderate to liberal people of all faiths, all that good work is vital to do. We should keep doing it. But it helps our soul to know where we are in the larger time frame. Because if we think that we can save industrial civilization, we're going to keep getting frustrated. We're going to wonder why our activism isn't enough, and why all the good work that we do isn't enough, and why do we still see such chaos and stupidity in the political realm, the economic realm, and everywhere else. But if we understand what reality has been revealing through evidence now for thousands of years, we recognize, oh, right, we're right on schedule. And what it does is it allows, I'll just speak personally, it allows me to face the challenges of our time rather than thinking of them as like, oh no, this shouldn't be. More like when the challenges show up on my doorstep, it's more like, oh, welcome, I've been expecting you. Come on in. Makes a huge difference, makes all the difference in the world. So I want to speak just a little bit about what the past is telling us, what the future is telling us, and how then in the present moment we can honor the revelation of the past, whether you use divine or secular language for that, and both are legitimate. And then how we can be a blessing to the future. In other words, I want to offer the big picture, that reality has been revealing through evidence. Now, I want to be really clear because I'm going to use a word that sometimes, sort of spooks some Unitarians. It's the word God. But I want to spell God in a different way. Okay, so G-O-D-D-E. G-O-D-D-E, God. That's how I spell God. And what I mean by God is very simple. Reality with a personality. Not a person outside reality. Okay, Uncle Sam isn't the God of the government, nor is Uncle Sam the spirit of the government. Uncle Sam is a personification of what's inescapably real, the U.S. government. So I'm using the word God as a personification, a deification of reality. Ultimate, fundamental, undeniable reality. In fact, I sometimes have philosophy majors, young male philosophy majors. They try to trip me up when I talk about being, preaching the gospel of right relationship to reality, which is an ecological message. And they'll sometimes trip me up and say, well, what do you mean by reality? And I love Philip K. Dick's definition. He says, reality is that which when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. So I want to speak about time as real, whether we believe it or not. Because I would say if I were to try to sum up in the smallest, most concise form why we are in the mess we are, it's because we thought that we could not be accountable to the future. Theists and atheists alike have both had such a trivial and impotent, inconsequential notion of God that they thought we could avoid being accountable to the future. And it turns out we can't. We will be accountable to the future. In fact, all sustainable cultures had a personal I-thou relationship to the future and a personal I-thou relationship to the past. That's what the honoring of ancestors is, simply having a personal relationship. It's imagining that how would our past ancestors help us? How would they guide us? What wisdom can we gain from their experience that helps us live in a way that's a blessing to our grandchildren? Right now, we're not living that way because we haven't had that guidance. So I want to offer how we got in this mess and our way out, and then I'll go more into this at 12:30. 3 things. One is we lost our intimacy with reality. We lost our intimate, personal relationship to reality. And this actually happened over many thousands of years. There was no one event. It started with agriculture. Once we started settling down, for 99% of human history, we lived as hunter-gatherers, tribal, small units. Ants thrive in communities, right? Bees thrive in hives. Wolves thrive in packs. Humans thrive in tribes of 200 or less people. The challenge is we don't live that way anymore. So there's this collective insanity. We no longer have the kind of ecological checks that helped us live in a way that the past would be proud of and was a way that blessing to the future. See, being accountable to the future, it's really simple. It's inviting the future to tell us what is good and bad and right and wrong for us. It comes back to the kind of indigenous awareness of making decisions now based on how it would affect the next 7 generations. That's a personal relationship to the future. It's allowing the future to be the judge of what's good and evil now. Right now we don't do that. And yet that's what we have to do. So we lost our intimacy with reality. First, agriculture, because we started basically thinking that we were masters of nature. We could control nature. And then with city-states started living in a way that was destructive of the natural world, because we started settling down into these cities, and it wasn't long before all the major forests were chopped down, and we used the energy from the forests and our waste. And so we see that's one of the reasons why ecological degradation has caused civilizations to contract. Okay, so city-states and writing gave us the sense that we were above the written word. Because words used to be things that were life-changing, and we lived within them. With writing, we start having this arrogance of thinking that we are above this creation. Did you know that there were no transcendent, otherworldly notions of God or the divine prior to writing? This is a fact. Check it out yourself. And so then the last two things that put the nail in the coffin of our intimacy with reality were the Black Death in Europe in 1347, between 1347 and 1350. 3 years, okay? A third of Europe died. We can't even imagine the psychic trauma that caused. See, prior to that, God was pretty much understood as synonymous with reality. And yes, reality is mother-like, reality is father-like. These are metaphors about the nature of reality. Right? They become trivialized if you think of them as otherworldly fathers or otherworldly mothers or whatever. So the Black Death led people in Europe, much of the world, but especially Europe, to not trust nature anymore. Nature was this thing that was going to kill you, maybe. And so otherworldly notions of God became just paramount then, just primary. Because within 100 years of that, we started using clocks as our basic metaphor for reality. And once you've got a clockwork universe, once you think of nature as a clock, then God becomes trivialized. God is the clockmaker outside a clockwork universe, and nature becomes desacralized. Nature is no longer a thou to be honored and respected. Nature is now an it that we can use and exploit for human benefit. And we think our true home is somewhere else when we die. So that we don't have to live in right relationship to primary reality anymore. We don't even think of it as primary reality. We think of it as the environment. The environment is not our surroundings. The environment is our source. It's what gave us birth, it's what sustains us, and it's what will receive us when we die. But notice the difference. If I call this Gaia, if I call this God's nature, I'm going to have a different relationship than if I call it the environment. Language matters. So we lost our intimacy, our primary intimacy with reality. Again, over a series of things, ranging from agriculture, city-states, writing, then the Black Death, and then finally the clockwork universe, which did it in. We also, I say we, Europeans were at saturation. They had reached carrying capacity. There was population pressure. There was starting to be the tension that happens in all species when there's population pressure, when you exceeded carrying capacity. And guess what? An entire half a world was discovered. The New World, North and South America, this entire hemisphere was discovered. There were people living here, but our microbes that had competed and all wiped out 90% of them before we even interacted with them, most of them, only a few people. And so this seemed to be an uninhabited continent, full of resources. Again, the primary source of energy for all of human history prior to coal was trees. And so there was this forest, I mean the trees and then metals and then when we discovered coal. So it seemed to be limitless. So the mindset and the institutions that were created in America reflected what's called carrying capacity surplus. There was more than enough resources, more than enough ability to take our waste. And farmers could come, they could live however they lived for a decade or two, diminish the soil, and then go on, and we kept going further west. So this carrying capacity surplus mindset, because of the New World, combined with tapping energy, one-time energy, concentrated energy, 400 million years of trapped sunlight, and we're burning through it in 300 years. So the combination of the new world and tapping ancient concentrated energy allowed population to go skyrocketing, and pollution to go skyrocketing, and institutions and technologies go skyrocketing. Some of this has been good. This isn't all bad. Many of us are really grateful for what has been occurring over these hundreds of years. The problem, the challenge, is that it created a mindset and expectation of limitlessness. Limitlessness, this sense that human omnipotence, we were the masters of nature. We could control nature. The problem is that's not the nature of reality. We are a subset of nature. We're not the masters. And we're about to learn that in the hard way. We have decades and indeed centuries of difficulty. We're probably in the last decade or two of the American Empire, where 5 or 6% of the world's population take 30% of the resources for our benefit. We're within a decade or two of that going away. And we're in the last century or two of industrialism. And we know this because we know a lot about how civilizations contract and collapse. So that's the bad news. The good news is that when you step back and look at human history as a whole, humans have been around for 2.5 million years. Homo habilis, walking upright using stone tools, that was 2.5 million years ago. We survived 17 ice ages. So if you imagine just pretending that humans exist, let's just pretend that we don't go extinct, because I don't think we will. I think there's going to be serious population declines over the next 100, 200 years, massive. We could be down to 1 billion people or 2 billion people 200 years from now. But that doesn't mean extinction. So if we look out the next 2.5 million years, just imagining it, we had this brief time that we were out of right relationship to God, G-O-D-D-E. We were out of right relationship to primary reality. But we can't stay out of right relationship to primary reality for very long without going extinct. We will either come back into right relationship to reality or we will go extinct. There's no other options. And that's true for all species. It's just that we have symbolic language and we have tool-making ability. So if you look at just the last 5,000 years and the next 5,000 years, here is the era of concentrated, abundant energy. We will soon be back to using what all humans have used for the other 99% of human history, which is wind, sun, and animal and human muscle power. We will soon be back to that. So the question then becomes, how can we reclaim the wisdom, this ecological wisdom of honoring grace limits, honoring the carrying capacity, and doing so with consciousness so that our tools help us live in a mutually enhancing relationship with the natural world. That's why the bad news I sum up as we are in the early stages of the Great Reckoning. We've been out of right relationship to reality and we're now about to experience consequences of biblical proportion. That's the Great Reckoning. But that's not the end of the story, because it's also the great homecoming. Humanity, the prodigal species. We squandered our inheritance. We're waking up to our predicament, in the pig pen as it were, and we're coming home to reality. Whether you use God language to talk about that or secular language, doesn't matter. We're coming back home to reality. And that's good news. And understanding catabolic collapse, understanding why civilizations do this, allow us to know that our way into the future is very simple. It's not complex. It's basically having a personal relationship to the future and inviting the future to be the judge for us today of what's good and evil. Here's the thing. Good is what promotes personal wholeness, social coherence, and ecological integrity. That is right relationship to ourselves, right relationship to our group or groups, and right relationship to the ground of our being, primary reality. Evil is what diminishes or destroys personal wholeness, social coherence, and ecological integrity. This is not theological rocket science. See, because of our brains, we will always have concepts of progress and growth and success. Let's just use the word success. We will always have some concept of success and failure. If we simply judge success and failure based on the present moment and ignore these countless generations in the past and what wisdom they could have to share, and ignore the ecological wisdom of all the sciences that have to do with right relationship to primary reality, if we ignore all that, we're in trouble. We will condemn the future. If that's our measures of success and failure. But if we invite future generations, have a personal I-thou relationship, like personify the future. What if we personify the past? See, I do this as a Christian. I'm an evolutionary Christian. I'm a green Christian. I'm a Christian naturalist. I'm a Christian realist. I interpret all the mythic elements of my faith as symbolic of saying something about this one reality in which we live and move and have our being. So I have no supernatural or otherworldly beliefs at all. I interpret all that mythic language in this world realistic way. So for me, the Trinity, as an ecological Christian, are not three otherworldly persons, Father, Son, and Spirit. It's time personified. The past, the Creator, 13.8 billion years of creativity and whatever brought this universe into being, if I give a human face to that, if I personify that, that is inescapably real. But then we're asking the question, what does that reality have to tell us? What does the past give birth to? What's the only, to use Christian religious language, the child of God? The future. Why is it that all the religious Christians that speak of the Messiah and the Christ and the second coming, it's all about the future? So for me, I personify the future. For me, when I speak in Christian churches, I just did this the other day. I spoke at 2 Christian churches in the last week. For me, when I've asked Christ to be my Lord, I'm asking the future to be my guide. I'm asking the future to be the primary thing in my heart that helps me make decisions in the moment in terms of who I vote for, what do I do, how I spend my money, what my life is committed to, and so on. It's nothing otherworldly. And for the Hebrews, the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, was a personification of wind and breath. Ruach Adonai, Ruach Elohim. This was a personal relationship, an I-thou relationship with our breath and with the wind. And guess what? You didn't need to believe in the Spirit. If you're breathing, you're experiencing the Spirit. And the only time you stop experiencing the Spirit is when you die. The breath leaves you. There's nothing otherworldly about it. So for me, having a personal relationship to the past, having a personal relationship to the future, and the only way that I can honor the past and be of service to the future is in the present moment. This is the realizing of religion. It's the greening of religion. And what gives me hope is that we are planting the seeds to fulfill Carl Sagan's statement at the beginning, which is that all forms of religiosity that will survive into the future, 100 years from now, 150 years from now, they will all embrace ecology and evolution at their heart. And I can say that confidently because think about it. Imagine someone who's alive 100 years from now. Let's say your great-great-grandchild is alive 100 years from now. Anybody who's alive 100 years from now will judge and condemn their grandparents and their great-grandparents' religion if it didn't have ecology at its heart. If it wasn't about pro-future rather than anti-future. So that's why I can say this confidently. I'm not predicting the future. I'm not channeling anything otherworldly. I'm saying that ecology and evolution are sacred. People living 100, religions, all religions, because Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, all these faiths will probably still exist 200 years from now, assuming humans exist. But they will be ecological Christians, ecological Buddhists, ecological. Those they will embrace ecology and evolution. It's already beginning to happen. That's the good news. Pope Francis, Patriarch Bartholomew, who's the head of the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Dalai Lama, these are major global religious leaders that are at the forefront of what I'm calling the evidential reformation, where we value evidence as modern-day scripture. Evidence is divine communication. When I speak in Christian churches, I say facts are God's native tongue, and trends are God's bullhorn. But we haven't been paying attention to trends that way. And that's one of the reasons why we're in the Great Reckoning and we're going to hit the wall. But that's not bad news. It's also good news. I'm a short-term pessimist and I'm a long-term optimist. I call myself an apocalyptimist. I'm an apocalyptimist. Here's the fundamental stance of an apocalyptimist. Of course we're screwed. Thank God. But it can nourish our souls. It can allow us to deal with the challenges that are going to be coming in the coming months and years and decades from that place of, I've been expecting you, come in, that welcoming heart, so that we can do the work of justice and peace and sustainability and all the work of spirituality, but we can do it with a green heart, with a sacred understanding of time and a sacred understanding of nature, God's nature, Gaia, primary reality, God, G-O-D-D.